Tractate Eruvin, General Introduction, Part 3. Private domain prohibited by rabbinic decree. Most of this tractate deals with the laws of areas that are a private domain according to biblical law, but where the sages applied certain prohibitions against carrying. Several types of areas were prohibited. A. An alley. To understand much of this tractate, it is necessary to be familiar with the layout of streets and houses in Mishnaic times. In those times, and even up to modern times in many places, several houses would open into a courtyard, and several courtyards would in turn lead into an alley through which the people would pass to get to the street. Such an alley is known as a mavoi. Typically, the mavoi was a dead-end alley, closed on three sides and open only on the fourth side where it met the public domain. Under biblical law, the closed alley is a private domain, and one is permitted to carry in it. The sages were concerned, though, that people might view the alley as a public domain, since it is used as a street and is commonly open on one side. Therefore, if carrying were permitted in the alley, people might come to carry in a real public domain as well. To prevent this, the sages prohibited carrying in the alley unless an adjustment is made to its open end. However, it is not necessary to erect a partition or any of its legal equivalents described above to close the opening. Rather, it suffices to place a korah, crossbeam, across the top of the opening, or to stand a lechi, pole, next to one of the walls at the opening. B. Breached in its entirety to a prohibited area. If an area in which carrying is permitted is completely open to an area in which carrying is forbidden, carrying becomes forbidden in the permitted area as well. This is a rabbinic decree. Completely open means that there is no partition at all along the side that joins the two areas. For example, if a courtyard is open on one side to a Carmella, it becomes forbidden to carry in the courtyard as well. Even if parts of a partition continue to separate the two areas, but the opening between the parts is more than 10 amos, so that it is considered a breach rather than an entrance, the two areas are considered completely open to each other, and the forbidden area prohibits carrying in the permitted area. If, however, the opening between them can be considered an entrance, the two areas are legally separated, and carrying therefore remains permissible in the permitted area. There are even cases in which carrying becomes prohibited as a result of two permitted areas being completely open to each other. This happens when carrying is for some reason forbidden between the two permitted areas and they are completely open to each other. In such a case, carrying becomes forbidden even within each area. An example of this is discussed in Mishnah chapter 9, Mishnah 2. C. Karpif, an area that is enclosed but not for residential purposes. Some areas are given Carmella status even though they are enclosed within partitions that make them a private domain. If an area larger than 5,000 square amos was enclosed for purposes not related to daily living, it is rabbinically treated as Carmella despite its partitions. This will be explained further in the Mishnah in chapter 2, Mishnah 3. An enclosed area for non-residential purposes is generally referred to as a karpif. A common example of this is a large vegetable garden. Eruve hatzeros and shitufe mevos. Aside from the prohibitions against carrying in an alley or courtyard that come from its being open on one side, there's yet another prohibition that results from the fact that, compared to houses, courtyards and alleys resemble public areas. Houses are owned and used by individual families, whereas courtyards are owned and used by the residents of all the houses that open into them. The rabbis were concerned that people might think of carrying from a house to a courtyard like carrying from a private domain to a public domain. They therefore prohibited carrying from a house into a courtyard unless something is done before Shabbat to symbolically join all the houses of the courtyard into one house. This procedure is known as an Erev Kippur, a merging of the courtyard. They made a similar rule for alleys because courtyards, which serve only the houses in them, seem more private than alleys, which are used by all courtyards opening into them. Here, too, they require symbolically joining the courtyards of an alley into one courtyard to permit carrying from a courtyard into an alley on Shabbos. The procedure for doing this is known as shitufe mevos. Chapters 6 through 9 deal exclusively with the laws of Eruve, Chatzeret, and Shitufe Mavos. A more complete introduction to these topics will therefore appear at the beginning of chapter 6.